Hello, this is LizardGenes and welcome to episode 3 of my gaming podcast. I'm joined by Gibbagobba and
Ooh,
Edward,
hello.
and we're going to be talking about the Half-Life series, starting with Half-Life 1 and then moving up to the present day episode 2, Half-Life 2 episode 2, and then we'll talk about our aspirations, what we think might be good for Half-Life 3. So, I guess just as a starter, what was your first experience with Half Life?
Uh, I actually it was Half-Life 2 because if I was playing any games that came out around 98 or 97, it was definitely Jedi Knight.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and while Half-Life did come out a year later, it was supposed to. I actually heard that at one point Jedi Knight was nominated to be Game of the Year for 97 until a year later it was dethroned by Half-Life.
Yeah, yeah.
Since pretty much everyone's familiar with Half-Life, and
Mm.
never really had heard about it at that time. It was quite some time ago, but it was like around 2004 that I did see Half-Life 2,
Hmm.
and it was actually someone else played it, like a relative was playing it. I'm like, that's pretty cool. And I just, at some point I would play it later on, and it was, well, definitely a different kind of game, a lot more story-oriented, but,
Mm.
first-person kind of story. You never usually see that.
Yeah, it was interesting because Half Life 1, I mean, my first experience was in, was it 98 or 99? It was soon after the game was released. But the good thing about Half Life 1 was there weren't any objectives like Jedi Knight, but everything was told from within the game. Like, there were no cutscenes, but stuff that happened through scripted sequences made you feel like you were part of this evolving world, and that you were participating in this story. I thought that was really good. That was a paradigm shift for FPSs, you know?
Well, yeah, because, even games, because obviously Half-Life was built on top of games like Doom and Quake,
Yeah,
but they decided to change it around in the way it played, whereas Quake and Doom didn't have objectives. Quake 2 did, though,
yeah.
but those games were just complete the level and move on to the next one, like just
Mm.
knock each level down, whereas this one didn't have levels, it had segments of one continuous game.
Yeah, yeah. It was like you would go through all different parts of the Black Mesa Research Facility, and it felt like one overall place. Yeah, um,
Even with the backtracking involved, I mean, Quake 2 had backtracking, but it was still pretty simplistic, is that you couldn't return to previous segments, whereas
mm,
Half-Life 2, or Half-Life, they even had chapters
yeah,
to divide it like a story.
yeah. That's true. And there was clever manipulation of the environment, like in the blast pit. Um,
That is awesome.
yeah, like it was one of these games that really made you feel like you were connected to the world. It wasn't just you and your guns shooting a bunch of aliens. It was like you participated in the world environmentally. And obviously in Half Life 2, they upped the ante with the gravity gun where you could like pick stuff up and throw it or, use it for a whole variety of different ways. So I think like, I mean, Half Life 1 was really good for its, like, it took the Quake model and then transformed it into like, it was almost like you were in the movies. Like you weren't just watching cutscenes like movies. You were actually participating as an action hero in movies. Um,
It, and it wasn't even just like that, because, I mean, previous games, they had some resemblance of a story, but it was usually like, you're the world's most badass marine or something. Can you
yeah,
defeat the bad guys? Whereas Half-Life, you weren't supposed to be a supreme badass. You're just a guy who went to his job, everything went to hell,
mm,
and you're just trying to get the heck out of there in one piece.
yeah. And I love that introduction where you're on the monorail, and it kind of introduces you to the world. Like it's our everyday. You're going into work, and you're right. It wasn't just like you're thrown into a military conflict. It's like it's an accident, and the way that the story evolves is really good because you're right. You're not just like you're not a generic soldier. You're a scientist. You're someone that you wouldn't normally associate with the FPS genre. More like a puzzle games where you use your mind, and I guess in a way you do kind of use your mind.
I mean, it's got a few puzzles, but it was still, like, technology was new at the time, and they couldn't really do puzzles as complex as the physics ones they had in Half-Life 2, or even the advanced physics spatial puzzles in
Mm,
Portal,
yeah. Hmm.
which I would like to see some form come in future Half-Life games. Like, I'm not saying put the portal gun in Half-Life,
Mm,
because that's kind of more of a tangential thing, but I'd like to see some resemblance of complex puzzles in Half-Life, but not for the sake of having puzzles, just something that works with Half-Life's gameplay.
Well, they're both referenced in each other, like in Portal. I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, if you've not played it all the way through, but Black Mesa.
Yes, I have.
You have. Well, you'll know Black Mesa is referenced in Portal.
Yeah, they're supposed to. Even Aperture is referenced in episode 2.
Yeah, the Borealis. Yeah. So
yeah, in fact, it's a little bit of a spoiler, but there's a bit of a, I wouldn't call it an Easter egg, but there's a secret in Portal 2 where in the lower bowels of the Aperture facility, there is, you can find the Borealis dry dock.
I remember, yeah, I looked online. I think, do you not have to, like, do no clip or something to get
No, it's actually in a door. There's a door behind a bunch of crates. If you get behind the crates and go through the door, there's some other stuff in there too, but there's the empty dry dock, and you get a Steam achievement that says like a ship aboard or something.
Oh, all right.
A ship overboard.
Yeah. So they are actually putting references to each other. So I suppose, well, we'll talk about the episode 3 thing, or rather the Half-Life 3 thing later. But yeah, Edward, what was your first experience with Half-Life?
First time I got to play it at a friend's place. I was interested in the sort of new model schemes and if one can call it lip syncing.
Yeah.
That's enough.
From being from Jedi Knight or even old Jaguar style 3D games, I was sort of interested in the new smooth lighting effects within Half-Life and an interesting game weapon selection.
Yeah.
Scroll the mouse and click to select your weapon. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But I wasn't too happy that all the weapons were sort of combined onto the 5 numbers.
I think it was like supposed to be categories.
Yeah, because you had like explosives, alien weapons, military weapons,
explosives, handguns, submachines, or
pistols.
Special. But pistols, hand throwing, explosives. Yeah.
And there was like the kind of experimental weapons.
Yeah, like the glue-on gun or the Tau cannon.
Yeah. It was
and the fact that you were always in first person, I suppose it sort of made me feel like I was the scientist.
Yeah.
Trying to get home.
Yeah, and it's the fact that your character doesn't have any complex backstory, kind of helps to.
No, you're just subject Freeman mind, going to work, gonna take care of what was it now?
I believe he was a experimental physicist. Or was he a theoretical? It doesn't even matter. I know that in I think it was the PS2 version, there was a manual. In fact, I have that right here. It's his employment letter or something. Where is that? There it is. All right, let's see here. Here it is. The Black Mesa Research Facility, Dr. Gordon Freeman, visiting fellow, University of Innsbruck, Austria. Offer of employment. Because I know that they referenced it in Half-Life 2. He went to the MIT.
Oh right, Boston MIT.
This letter shall confirm a recent telephone conversation in which you were offered and did accept a position at the Black Mesa Research Facility. You shall begin at Level 3 Research Associate status, assigned to the Anomalous Materials Laboratory.
Yeah, that's like the first level, really. But it's now, I've not played the PS2 version, but did the PS2 version have like a co-op thing in it?
Yeah, it was the only one that had a co-op.
Yeah, because that's something like I'm not sure, but is the other co-op person the female HEV suit scientist? Because I know you can play as her in the multiplayer of the PC version of Half-Life, but
Yeah.
yeah. So that how does the co-op thing work? Is it like you play through the single-player game co-op, or is it like a series of missions that
It's its own separate story
Oh.
alongside Half-Life.
all right?
Because you can play you can actually play co-op by yourself, a single player co-op, which sounds stupid, but basically you press the select button to swap between the two female scientists.
Oh, okay.
And it does kind of explain a bit of the backstory to what happened, where the administrator is sending down higher orders, because you never meet the administrator. Obviously, this is supposed to be Wallace Breen.
Yeah.
But the CEO or something is talking about the risks and precautions to take in this experiment, and then they bring the sample to the loading bay and begin preparations for the testing instruments.
Yeah.
Which obviously above ground is Gordon in that testing chamber.
Oh, right. So it references the other story.
Yeah. Otherwise, if you're playing it with a friend, because it's the PlayStation 2, it's a split screen.
Ah, yeah, of course, yeah. That's interesting.
But it handles really well.
Yeah, because it's. I wonder why they didn't do that for include that as a PC on a special edition or something. Because that sounds
Maybe
like
they had to set the PS2 version apart.
yeah, I suppose so, to make it unique. Yeah.
There was a plan because obviously there was the recent. It's not finished. Final 3 chapters aren't added yet, but there was the recent Half-Life 2 engine remake of the first game, which was called Black Mesa.
Yeah, Black Mesa Source, yeah.
And I've been playing through that. I had already beaten what they got so far, and it's really good.
Yeah, I remember I played that as well, yeah.
There's a few issues, but I'll talk about those maybe later. But
yeah.
There was a plan at one point to add co-op, but because they were already trying to get the main game out, they haven't even released multiplayer. Since it was such a struggle, they decided that co-op was too trivial to even add.
Yeah, it's interesting because
who's to say that today's users can't mod it in after the fact?
There was a plan, actually. Even someone, because, they decided they'll teach the player through the first level rather than through the hazard course. There was a plan for modders to create a hazard course level separate from the original development team, but that was actually something that confused me, because the hazard course, is kind of there. It's not like you need it. The game does a good enough job of teaching you how to play through the first level. But it's kind of bizarre in the fact that Freeman's supposed to be this guy who was just a scientist, no actual military experience. But then it's like, how is he able to use a gun so well? It's like, it's just because, he took the hazard course. Like, why are scientists required to go through a shooting range? What are they expecting to happen?
Well, that's true. I mean, the conspiracy theorist in me would suggest that the anomalous materials explosion or the resonance cascade was actually planned by, the G-Man or something. Because you still haven't found out about what his plan is, what his relationship to the Zen aliens are, the Combine, all that kind of stuff.
I like the theory that he's actually a future Gordon Freeman, which I don't really buy yet because, he has all these psycho powers and stuff.
Yeah.
But someone took the liberty of taking the Half-Life 2 box art image of Freeman and then putting it alongside one of the concept arts of G-Man from Half-Life 2.
Yeah.
And did a cross-examination, and they look practically similar. It's kind of disturbing.
Yeah, it could be that. I mean, they still have a lot to explain, with the next installment, But,
well, actually, there is something that doesn't quite tally with that theory. If Gordon and G-Man would be the same guy, why would G-Man and the Vortigons be on opposing sides, as it were? There was something about that G-Man was sort of in a battle with the Vortigons.
It does make me... I mean, obviously we still gotta wait and find out. It's just so much we can't even predict. It makes me wonder, kind of like the Doctor Who thing. I'll just call it the Doctor Who theory, how the big question is, who is the Doctor in the TV show? because no one ever knows his name. And I'm thinking, heck, I bet even back in 1963 when the show was started, up to this point, nobody had ever even come up with what his name would be, because that's the whole premise of the show, and it kind of spoils the fun of it if they did. Actually,
the premise is that the Time Lords have, shall we say, abstract names. For example, we say Doctor Who, but his actual name, the way he calls himself, is the Doctor. That's it.
And there's the
That
Master.
is just a question.
His nemesis being the Master. So
they actually did reveal what the Master's name was.
Okay, so he did have a name, but let's say the Doctor has gone so far that he has forgotten his own name. Who knows? Maybe there's a professor out there as well, before the whole incident.
Well, Ace did refer to him as Professor.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to save this from becoming a Doctor Who podcast.
Yeah, I think
let's get back to
the theory I was trying to propose is the fact that it's the underlying premise, and it makes me wonder if a similar theory can be applied to Half-Life, whereas even Valve doesn't know who G-Man is, and they're making it up as they go. Or do they have an overarching plan we just don't know about?
I think it's interesting because, I mean, they've obviously spent a lot of time building the characters and stuff, but they probably didn't know how successful Half-Life would be. That it really defined them as a kind of a publisher or a developer / publisher, that kind of thing. So they thought, right, well, the gaps that have been between each one has been so long that they've had so many other projects in the interim. Maybe they are just making up as they go along, and maybe the genius of the G-Man is that, we don't know who he is, and that's what keeps us playing. Are we going to find out in Half-Life 3, that kind of thing?
If they are making this stuff up as they go, they're freaking good at it, at keeping it all consistent.
Yeah. Well, they have a writer. I don't know who his name is. He's some sci-fi writer that actually does it for them. So they've actually got someone to write the story.
That's good. Most failed game stories happen because they either put up a half-baked story by themselves or hired a writer at the last minute.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they're really good at id Software are really good at technically developing stuff, but in terms of story, and John Carmack himself has admitted it, they don't see story as the biggest thing. They don't really try to put in a story, I suppose, so they get away with it. But for those that, the developers that really try and build in a story but don't have any writing experience, it kind of shows.
Well, consider how hilarious it is that back when they were originally developing Doom, after they had succeeded with Wolf 3D, Tom Hall wanted to at least, because he didn't like the violent direction it was taking since he had pioneered Commander Keen, along with John Carmack, he decided to at least write a compelling story and character, but they shot that down, saying it would only get in the way of a pure action experience.
Yeah.
And Doom doesn't really have a story. It has the very baseline story of, demons invade on Mars, you must stop them because you're the most badass Marine ever. And it's fine, I'll buy it. I mean, I only played Doom for the gameplay because, they don't have a story. But I don't know how that would have, if having one would have detracted from the rest of the gameplay, because great level design, great art design, great gameplay, it's very solid. And the story's pretty stupid, but what do you expect? I mean, it's kind of like the B movie of video games. Yeah,
they don't really need the story. I think maybe the story, Doom in its current way, would, the story would get in the way of the action. And even Doom 3, where the technology was far superior, they kind of retold the original Doom story. And again, the lighting, the unified lighting surfaces, all that kind of stuff, that was the big sell. And the fact it was, hey, it's Doom, we're back, So, but I think Half-Life is a different experience. And one of the things that's interesting about Half-Life is the expansion packs, like Half-Life Opposing Force and Half-Life Blue Shift. And how they took the formula, and obviously there were different developers. It was Gearbox that did those rather than Valve. But
back when Gearbox had the credibility, they've kind of lost now.
Well, I think Borderlands 2, the Borderlands franchise is still sustaining them, but in terms of Aliens, Colonial Marines, and Duke Nukem Forever, that's two major, overly hyped games which have seriously under-delivered.
Not to mention, both of them were like on 12-year development hell cycles since Alien. Not many. I don't know how many people would know this, but Aliens: Colonial Marines have been in development since 2001, and even now, some people are calling it a bait and switch. It's like I don't even know if Gearbox can salvage whatever faith they had left. But what I did like about what they did, because they worked on a lot of things at the time. So, didn't they make Brothers in Arms?
I think so, actually. Yeah, the World War II.
Well, when they had also done some work on the original Halo Combat Evolved, but when they worked on the Half-Life expansion packs, I like that it was the same exact story, but told through different perspectives, giving us basically the underlying plot.
That's
but
right.
A totally new idea of what's going on.
Yeah, like I remember in Opposing Force, you get into the big generator room, the big portal thing just before he gets teleported to Zen. And then when you're playing Opposing Force, you actually get into that room and just see Freeman jump through the portal. I thought that was really clever, the way that they stitched those stories together. Like, it takes place at the same time, but just from a different perspective.
Yeah. I mean, Opposing Force, I think, is the most significant one because it also has a lot of new stuff added to it, like new weapons and things to do, new kinds of enemies.
Yeah.
Blue Shift wasn't bad. I haven't completed either. I don't think I've even really started Blue Shift, but Blue Shift, it's kind of that, it's not necessary, but it's still cool to have that they decide to explain a few more things from a different perspective.
Yeah.
Whereas Opposing Force, I think, had a lot more of an impact in developing the story.
Yeah.
Because you're seeing it from the complete opposite side.
And the different weapons reflect different status. Like with Shepard, I think his name was. Commander Shepard. This was in the days before Mass Effect Shepard. You were Shepard, and you had big military weapons. You didn't have a crossbow. You had a sniper rifle, and even the way that he reloads the gun. It was interesting. If you look at the way that Freeman reloads the guns and prods the snark, he's a much more inquisitive type of character. He's a discoverer. He's a scientist. Whereas if you look at the reload animations of Shepard, he's much more confident with military weapons. It kind of, again, it's the animations, it's the subtle things which make you identify with the person that you are. You're a soldier or you're a scientist based on, small details. I think Valve are really good at coding in small details. They're
never really blunt about things. It's developing a world realistically, even in fiction, where you don't have to have a lot of drawn-out exposition. You just pop the player in this scenario, and not like in the traditional sense, but we're like, oh, you're a scientist. It's like, really? Do I need to know much about science? It's like, no, that's not the point. It's just, you'll get it as you go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the small details. You don't need drawn-out exposition like, this is the character, this is what they do. It's like, you can tell just by the way they speak.
Well,
that's how good character building works.
And good design as well, because so many of these games, when you're playing an FPS, it tells you how to jump and crouch. It's like, yes, we know how to jump and crouch, but I think, the tutorial for Half-Life is kind of superfluous, as we've discussed before. It's like the tutorial or the training mission is the first level, It introduces you to, the fact he's a scientist, the fact that he's in this lab and there's something big going on, there's some kind of secret research, but it also teaches you the basic jumping, crouching, fighting, interaction with the world without giving you a tutorial like push A to open doors, And it goes back to that time when FPSs weren't just, they weren't the mainstream for everyone. FPSs were still not kind of niche, but, they were more, they didn't think that their players were, completely new to the genre. They weren't aiming
very
at everyone.
Specific demographic, but I mean, good developers will use a term I like to fall back on, which is conveyance, and how well your game is able to teach by play.
Yeah.
If your game is so complicated that it requires like blatantly explaining in text or something how to play, then you've done a bad job as a designer.
It breaks
because
the
every
realism
good
as well.
game I play is able to teach just through play. I mean, even games like, say, System Shock, where there is a tutorial at the beginning and they're just explaining the core concepts, but still rely that, you know how to move, how to move the mouse and stuff, and and it's all optional anyways, is what I like, is that all these tutorials are optional instead of forced down your throat at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, you know, now that some people who play FPSs, they've never played a game before Call of Duty. They've never played an FPS before Call of Duty, so they're aiming at a mass market that maybe doesn't have, you know, an experienced audience. But for Half-Life and Half-Life 2 as well, you know, they were basically aiming at people who loved Quake and Doom and really knew about the FPS and how to control it and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So,
well, see, it also goes back to the fact that I feel games today most FPS games are bad. I mean, not necessarily like awful, just not very good in the fact that they're so linear. There's too much hand-holding in the FPS genre today, where games should rely that a player can figure things out for themselves. They don't even give them the chance, because I don't know where the mindset comes from, the idea that most people are dumb, and while I think that given the choice, a lot of people on Earth will choose to be dumb because it's easier.
well, I think
Because there's always going to be someone to hold your hand, but games like, I mean, how did people figure out the original Doom? It didn't have a tutorial. It's like, well, the developers trusted that players would figure things out.
Yeah, I think, you know, developers, maybe not developers much, but publishers are frightened that if a game is too complicated, if it assumes that its players are smart gameplay-wise, that the game will not sell very well. So they want to make the biggest, most accessible experience to the most number of players. And while that doesn't produce as good a product, you know, it's a well-defined experience. And I guess there's less risk-taking in FPSs, you know. And it'll be really interesting to see what they do with Half-Life 3, how Valve are going to kind of kickstart, you know, interesting FPSs, which, once again, you know, take their players, you know, they know that they've got sense. And I guess Valve have their own fans. I mean, you know, that kind of thing.
That's what I've always believed, is that developers shouldn't have to rely on the mass market who may have not chosen to play otherwise. In that, I believe Valve is not stupid. They do strange things. Like, I don't know how the Steam machines will work.
Yeah.
I already think that the controller design is kind of bizarre, but maybe, I mean, they're testing it. That's what I love about Valve, is they test everything rigorously.
Yeah.
And I don't think it'll fail. I believe the next Half-Life will definitely work, to say the least. I mean, at least they're not trying to show us so much. Like, Duke Nukem Forever failed because it had been overhyped for years. Half-Life, we haven't seen anything of the next Half-Life, so we have no idea what to expect. I mean, anything will work for us at this point.
Well, that's it. I mean, there's been leaks in terms of concept art, but no solid gameplay footage exists. And I think, yeah, because of that, they're obviously planning to do something completely new engine, probably a whole bunch of new ideas. And they might, I don't know if they'll do this, if it would be really cool if they could do this, make Half-Life 3 a launch title for the Steambox. That would really boost sales amongst, like, hardcore gamers, people who love the FPS.
Well, I guarantee it'll be, like, I don't know about a launch title, I don't know how close Steam machines are, and the fact that we haven't seen anything of the next Half-Life, but going along with it, if that ends up being an incidental fact, then it'll definitely be a selling point. I mean, they're trying to sell these machines as PCs, but in console format, and I don't know how it'll work exactly. I need to see more of what they're talking about to know. But it definitely sounds at least like a promising idea. I mean, Valve's got so much money, there's no way they can financially fail.
Yeah, I think it'll certainly be really interesting. We haven't really spoken that much about Half-Life 2. I mean, the difference between Half-Life and Half-Life 2, I mean, they built on the same formula, new engine, of course, the Source engine, but what was the first experiences playing Half-Life 2? I mean, Edward, have you played Half-Life 2?
Yes, I have.
And what was your experience of Half-Life 2?
Well, I thought it was, well, to begin with, it was creepy having a G-Man standing over you.
Oh, yeah.
Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine.
Yeah, and then, well, I can definitely tell that everything was, like, improved from way back when. The graphics were improved and everything, and because of that, the whole place just seemed more gritty, more dark and gritty.
Yeah.
And once I got out and looked around, I realized, oh, I see why it's so dark and gritty. We are under extreme suppression or something like that.
It was interesting because they really went for the kind of dystopian look. I mean, it's clearly been inspired by stuff like, Orwell's 1984 and...
that's actually, I would say, very much an inspiration. What I like is that it can take... It's like game developers, your best example on how to do a gritty post-apocalyptic future is right here. It's always been here. You don't need the grays and the browns. I mean, Half-Life 2... it's supposed to be realistic, but it's still a fairly colorful game in that they're not saturating everything. It still looks like real life. It's just everything's in a bad state. That's all that needs to be conveyed.
Yeah, and it's a believable world as well. It's not one of these things where you have to kind of say, oh, it's just a game. Like, some of these games that you play, and it's like a leap of logic. I'm just trying to think of an example, but, some games where something is preposterously unconvincing as a core concept, like an unconvincing alien race or an unconvincing reaction to an alien race. But the thing is with Half-Life 2, it really did seem like this was an entirely believable world, that the way that the people reacted, the resistance reacted, that was a conceivable, believable reaction,
It actually kind of brings to mind, and I would not be surprised if this was a core inspiration, but the relationship between, say, citizens and the Combine and even the Resistance, whatever they're called. I think they're just called Resistance. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it's actually kind of like the Rebel Alliance and the Empire. There's a totalitarian force that has taken control long ago, and our main character is the fish out of water protagonist, who ends up meeting a ragtag team of guys who just got everything they had, what little it was, and are going for a last-ditch effort to end the oppression. It's a famous, long-told story over many different accounts.
But I think also what makes Half-Life interesting, that sets it apart from these accounts, is the kind of inner political corruption, the way that the humans have made a deal with the aliens, and Wallace Breen, for example. There's this kind of thing that some people would side with the forces of evil, in the way that in Lord of the Rings, Saruman sides with the orcs because he thinks there's no way we can beat them.
Easier.
Yeah, exactly. In the same way that Neville Chamberlain might have done the same with, he was the Prime Minister in the UK. He actually thought that if we just stand aside from Hitler's forces, we're going to be okay. But that's obviously not what happened. There's this kind of idea that, there's a multitude of reactions. It's not just everyone has an automatic response to an oppressive force as it's bad, let's destroy it. It's like there's a whole range of different responses. And it's great to think that, it's more believable, that some people would react in different ways. And even the G-Man, because he kind of wants Freeman to go to places. Like in episode 2, he wants Freeman to get to, White Forest again? So he has an agenda.
I think it was.
Yeah, he has an agenda out with the alien forces. He's like kind of in the middle.
And of course, Freeman's just the one sitting by the whole time, like, I don't know what's going on. I'm just trying to make everything right again or something. And it's not like he's the savior or anything. What's funny is when the citizens treat him like he is, but it's more like the reason he would appear as a savior is because he was the guy who survived the ground zero of it all.
Yeah.
And, he just wants, he doesn't even, now I wouldn't say how he believes himself because we don't know. It's more like he's supposed to be a vessel for our consciousness.
Yeah.
But you can tell he's a guy who just wants to get everything done with so he doesn't have to deal with it anymore.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I can't remember which level, I think it's Nova Prospect, where there's this speech by Wallace Breen and he's saying, this free man, don't get any romantic ideas about his strength, his heroic status. So the game actually deconstructs the lone hero, sole survivor, better than everyone else. Like, in Quake 2, you're like one Marine out of every other, but yet all the other Marines can die so much easier than you. You're like this superhuman guy, But in Half-Life, they kind of narratively deconstruct that notion. I mean, obviously, they wouldn't gameplay deconstruct it because that would be too difficult. Like, if you died in the same way that you've had the same health as the NPCs, it would be kind of really hard.
It's got to be one of the most difficult writing jobs ever, but it's almost like they're criticizing trope of the invincible lone hero.
Yeah.
Whereas it's like he's not supposed to be. I mean, that's just how it comes out because he was there, and he was probably more well prepared than anyone because he was basically at the centroid of it all, and now he just wants to get it done with.
Yeah, and it's interesting that some of the scripted sequences in Half-Life 1 and 2 make it seem like luck. Like, you know the bit in, I think in Half-Life 1, I can't remember it, but there's an airstrike, and the airstrike happens when you're in these tunnels. You just quickly get into the tunnels, and then the airstrike happens.
Yeah.
And it's like, that was an act of luck. So it's like, Freeman survived not necessarily because he was a good fighter, but because he was in the right place at the right time. So it kind of makes
you... Just as G-Man said, the right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world.
Exactly, yeah. So it's like, some of it is just sheer luck, and it makes you feel vulnerable, and it makes you really invest in the world, because it's like, if you can be snuffed out so easily, it makes it all the more tense, you know, and I think it's a really good way of identifying that, again, through gameplay, more than just story, like, not just text, that kind of thing.
So, I'm sure they worked off of the silent protagonist thing, so that way you felt a more part of the story, but is it possible to say that Freeman has any specific personality just by what he goes through, just by his path?
Well, I don't know, because, like, you'd think that a man who went through Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2 and Episode 1 and 2 would be pretty traumatized. I mean, like, yeah, he avoids airstrikes, just. He nearly gets killed by assassins, just. He goes to an alien world and kills the main creature, just. And it's like all these different things you think, well, if that was real, or if that was someone that had a backstory, you'd think by Episode 2, Half-Life 2, Episode 2, he'd be pretty traumatized. But again, it doesn't work that way because he's the silent protagonist. He's the vessel, as you say, for our consciousness, our connection to the game. So in a way, it has all the advantages of, you know, you feel fragile, but at the same time, the stuff that happens to Freeman doesn't intrude on the enjoyment or the connection with the gameplay. So they've really got it best both ways.
Yeah, I like that it is, like, Freeman. It's like, who is Freeman? It's like, he's whoever you make him to be, really. And it's that old gamey kind of trope with the silent protagonist, like, say, Samus Aran, or even Doom Guy, or something, whatever his name is, where it's like, they wanted it so that way you felt it, so you feel more involved in the story. And then I hear, like, people say, they should make a Half-Life movie. It's like, I see a number of problems that could come from this, and it's the fact that games aren't merely products that have adaptations, like, say, Transformers was. It's the fact that, and, like, Transformers did have its own good adaptations, like the television series and stuff, or even its comic books, but it's the fact that games are now their own medium, and they can do well on their own. Yeah. We don't need adaptations in movies, because sometimes a story only works one specific way. It's the reason some stories only work as movies, some stories only work as books, and some stories only work as television shows.
Yeah.
Well, or some stories that could work both ways. I think some of the games that have that do sort of feel like a movie, but have parts of fighting, it is just that they come up with a good story idea, they plan out these sequences, but all this fighting in between, what kind of stuff should we do here? We can't really write this part in, so we turn it into a game instead.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, I mean, the best games can only ever be games. Like, you're right, Half-Life could never be a movie. You could never get all the complex interactions of Deus Ex into you could never convey all that into a movie, you know?
Well, now I do have a theory, and this is more, I have to keep coming up with names here, so we'll just call it the Star Wars theory, and the fact that Star Wars has hundreds of different kinds of adaptations, video games, books, television shows, and comic books. And it's the fact that they're not merely adaptations of the movies, or even that the movies are the central point of the series. They started it, but it's not like, oh, it's all this media based on the movies. It's like, no, it's all this media, including the movies, as part of a bigger story, told at many different points in time by many different points of view. So if you're doing a Half-Life movie, and someone made like kind of a spec film, like a fan film, off of Half-Life, and it was instead from their own idealization of the perspective of Adrian Shepard fighting alongside the Resistance instead of Gordon Freeman. So it's like the same universe, different perspective.
Yeah.
I think.
And I mean, they've done this before, like in video games and television shows, like and movies. Like Resident Evil has its movies, except it features characters not always seen from the game. So we get a new perspective that makes it worth, like, why would I want to watch a movie based on a game? I can just play the game, or vice versa. It's like, well, let's give them a different story so there's something new to see.
It's interesting
A
because
familiar template, a new story.
Yeah, some stories can only be told, like, in game format. Like, I don't know if I won't put any spoilers, but the gameplay of BioShock or the gameplay of Knights of the Old Republic, both of which have twists, big twists in them. The impact of that story narratively can only be conveyed through gameplay. You have to be the person. You know, you have to be looking at the game, particularly from a first-person perspective, because first-person really humanizes it, because you're viewing it as the character would view it from their own point of view. That really humanizes and makes you feel like you are that person, and because of the things that happen to that person, it's more impactful, the story that's told, if it feels like it's happening to you. In the same way that sometimes horror games can be the most scary games, because what is scary is happening to you.
Yeah, it is that sense of interaction, and that's what sets games apart. It doesn't inherently make them a better medium, it just makes them different from others. It's the only medium where viewing and entertainment is not merely passive.
Yeah.
Which is why I think games like, say, David Cage making a game like Beyond Two Souls or Heavy Rain, they're nice ideas, but they're very kind of wannabe-istic, where it's like we're just seeing a linear story that, we press a button every now and then, but it's still basically a movie.
Yeah, Fahrenheit is like that, or Indigo Prophecy. That was his
Half-Life
one as well.
does have a linear story, but it's still putting you in the middle of it, so you feel like you're actually part of it, no matter how linear it is. It's like, it's the illusion of choice.
Yeah, I think Half-Life, and that's something that's gone all the way through it, is that unique perspective and that unique interaction and relationship with the world. And other games like Far Cry the Far Cry series have attempted to do that, and they've put their own spin in it. But I think one thing we can certainly credit Half-Life with is that immersive being in the world, you know?
Yeah, I think that's the thing, because Half-Life really did kickstart. We're kind of jumping around this a bit, but I want to point it out directly that Half-Life did kickstart the idea of player immersion story. And honestly, Half-Life has both good and bad repercussions. It's good in the fact we get some new ideas and this new kind of take on narrative, and it's bad in the fact that many developers have tried to attempt it and merely kind of grind it down into hamburger. Like the Call of Duty games or anything. Now, I'm not going to judge you if you like the Call of Duty games. I don't, but you're not you're not a bad person for liking them. I just don't care for them. But it's merely because of the fact that they're so linear to the point. Now, it's like, yeah, you can have a linear story. Not every game has to be this multi-branch narrative like Deus Ex or anything like that.
Well, it's very formulaic, Call of Duty. They've honed it down to a very specific product, and it's so honed down in the way it could be like FIFA or Madden or these sports things where there's a new one every year and it's slightly updated. That's what Call of Duty is like. They do put a different spin in it by saying, it's a different time period, but the fundamental gameplay, story, controls, all that stuff, it's all the same each year, and it's all for profit. They found a formula that works and sells, and they're going to exploit it every year for profit.
And that's what bothers me. It's like they've gotten to this point where they've set up a template, a game engine and game template that's practically darn near perfect. So why don't they use this darn near perfect template to do something new and refreshing?
I think they're too frightened
it's like, we have the technology, let's use it.
Yeah, I think they're too frightened to do that. I mean, I guess a lot of people have deconstructed the military shooter as it is now. I mean, look at Spec Ops: The Line. That was a game that kind of deconstructed the psychology of, like, what would if you were an actual soldier in those kind of Call of Duty battles, what would you do? And that game kind of charts the progress of, or the onset of PTSD.
There is no way that a game like that comes out in a vacuum.
No, that's true. I mean, people looked at that and thought, this is an interesting spin. But the reason that game came about, that unique interpretation of military conflict from the first-person perspective, that was unique, and it came about because there was so much formulaic stuff in the form of a yearly Call of Duty. So you need to have, like, a very standardized series of conventions that everybody knows in order to deconstruct those conventions, in order to mock those conventions, in order to change or question those conventions. So Call of Duty can be a counter to interesting, in my opinion, better games. But yeah, I think we're kind of getting near the end now. I think to kind of finish off with, what would the two of you like in Half-Life 3? What would be like a really good thing to put in Half-Life 3?
Well, honestly, the same kind of gameplay. I'd say Half-Life 2's gameplay especially, because I don't want to say be formulaic, but it's the fact that we haven't seen enough Half-Life to say there's a formula.
Yeah.
And people are talking about adding RPG elements, and I don't know about that. That just sounds kind of un-Half-Life-y. Again, it's like the art in art, necessity is the soul of invention. So whatever works for the gameplay, whatever benefits the actual gameplay itself, rather than just to have it. But good level design and good story and characters, I mean, pretty much, I want to see the level of quality we got in Half-Life 2, where it's like, we can be surprised one more time.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. What about you, Edward? What would you like to see in Half-Life 3?
Well, about this thing about people saying more RPG, I think there's already a little bit of role-playing in the fact that you take the role of Gordon Freeman. You're not Gibbagobba experimenting with a piece of crystal, or Edward experimenting with a gravity gun. No, you're Gordon Freeman. But about Half-Life 3, well, I'd say turn up the graphics, turn up the story, and as said, surprise us one more time. Probably with, I don't know, some new weapon of some sort.
Yeah. I think one thing that they could do, and it'd be really interesting, if you look at the concept art for the Hydra in Half-Life 2, which was never used, it was used in a tech demo.
I saw that.
Yeah, the reason they cut it out was because it looked great when it killed NPCs, but when you were fighting it, it was very, it was very difficult to tell if it hit you or not. It had an amorphous hitbox. It didn't really, so they cut it out. But what I would like to do is I'd like to see maybe fighting it in the belly of the Borealis in the same way that you might fight, say, the big creature in the silo. Yeah,
the tentacles.
The tentacles, yeah, exactly. It's interact. The way you defeat it is not through sheer gun power, but through environmental manipulation. Something like that.
Yeah, that actually sounds like a better idea, in the fact that also it's been shown that you can recreate and make even better the tentacle design when they made Black Mesa, and that's just a modding team.
Yeah.
If Valve has a better budget for it, so they could actually improve it tenfold.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. And I think
I would not be surprised if they went and actually hired everyone on that modding team.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like too good an idea to throw away. So I'm hopefully looking forward to that. As Edward said, new guns. And I think finish the story. I mean, we've been left on a cliffhanger for what? Since 2007? That's a long time to wait. That's probably the longest cliffhanger from like movies and, even books, I guess.
Let's not even get started on the fact that it took 6 years to make Half-Life 2 since Half-Life 1.
Yeah.
Now, not counting the episodes, counting Half-Life 2 in and of itself, it has basically been about 9 years since Half-Life 2 released, and they still haven't made the third entry.
Yeah, and
it's not like, don't rush it, obviously, but do give some resolution and conclusion.
Yeah, I mean,
good stories have to end.
That Valve sold the. I think I heard some rumor about that Valve sold the concept of the third installment, whether it's episode or Half-Life 3, to someone else. That they would get it done. They would that Valve said, we're getting nowhere. What shall we do? Shall we close it down? And then someone comes along and buys it, and they go, "Oh, sure. If you can get this over and done with, we'll be happy to let you have it."
That sounds like a recipe for disaster, though.
That doesn't sound realistic to me, because Valve has never been one to just throw projects to the wind, especially the one they're most known for.
Well, that was the one that defined them, but it also sounds a bit like Duke Nukem Forever. You know, the 3D Realms couldn't finish it, so they gave it to Gearbox, and that was, you know, they should never have released it in its current state. They should have, you know,
started over.
Yeah, started over. But I don't know.
That was mostly because they had run out of money because they were making stupid business decisions.
Well, that's true. I mean, they should maybe have just, if Gearbox wanted to make good in it, they should have just started from scratch and probably finished the game in maybe 3 years rather than I have no idea how many years. 1996, I think it was. The development officially began on Duke Nukem Forever.
I mean, then they could have actually pulled the rug out from under people because most people, seeing this 12-year joke, knew it was going to suck. And it's like, well, expectations met because I wasn't expecting anything. Because how do you expect a game 12 years into making to end up being good at all from a studio that was screwing up time and time again? If they had actually taken the time to revamp it, everyone would be like, whoa, I would have never expected that.
Yeah, it would have been a good surprise. Maybe that's what Valve are doing for Half-Life 3 because they know they need to raise the bar not just for themselves but for the whole FPS genre, because the FPS genre has often been defined by its best games, and Half-Life has always been the best game of the time. So they don't want to, you know, let everyone down. They don't want to let the industry down. They don't want to let the genre down. The players, everyone. So that is a huge commitment. So they're probably wanting to make it as good as they possibly can. So I do want them to release it, you know, or at least give us some information that it's actually being worked on. Not necessarily get it out as quick as you can, but, you know.
Well, to paraphrase Gabe Newell, a good product can take a long time, but it can also suck forever.
Yeah, I mean, and that's Duke Nukem Forever in a nutshell, really.
Ironically, forever.
Oh, yeah, there we go. That's the last word on Duke Nukem Forever. But yeah, I think we've pretty much covered everything. I mean, unless there's anything else you two guys want to say.
I'd like to ask one question just to pretty much... I feel like there probably was more stuff we could have talked about, and maybe that could be saved for a later day.
Yeah.
Because there's a plethora of things that can be discussed, like maybe future influence. This thing is just most influence of the game, but there is one last question I want to ask. Comparatively for the games, either Half-Life 1 or 2, how well do you think they hold up today?
I think very well. I mean, I think modern shooters have a lot to learn from Half-Life's way of storytelling, Half-Life's invention, the way it creates characters, and the kind of art design, particularly Half-Life 2, which is kind of a mix of, like, you know, Soviet bloc, 1984 kind of sci-fi dystopia, and, you know, alien races. I think there's a lot to be learned. So I think in comparison to today's modern shooters, it actually holds up remarkably well. I
would almost say even better. Yeah, it's not the best graphically, but when you actually, like, Half-Life 1 does not graphically hold up entirely well, but that's excusable because of the age.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Black Mesa was for. And gameplay is a bit, well, clunky, but it was their first time, and for what they did, it's a very darn good job. And it was such a brand new thing. Usually it takes the first time to experiment. The first time is usually an experiment. It's not going to be perfect, but you're going to get something interesting. Half-Life 2, they knew exactly what they wanted to do, and while there are some things that aren't perfect, no game is perfect, and it's better to actually be able to admit it, because then you can like it even more. Half-Life 2, honestly, was a bigger, I'd say a better game. Maybe not the bigger influence, but it definitely raised the bar. I mean, even aesthetically and graphically, it holds up very well, even to this day.
Oh, I think so, yeah.
The animation is, like, nearly flawless.
Yeah, I think more lessons can be learned from those games, and hopefully they'll be, you know, taken on board every time a new FPS franchise is launched. You know, the developers go back and play Half-Life and Half-Life 2. Just to kind of see how the FPS genre was done really successfully in the past, how it can be.
It's like you don't need to have everyone on board with your game to make a lot of money. You will get faithful people, and usually it will spread by word of mouth. And with the technology we have today, like the internet, and now that video games are a lot more ubiquitous than ever before, you're guaranteed to get even more just by making a good product that tries.
Oh, I think so. I think a lot of people are still fans of Half-Life even today, and the fact that mods are still being made for the Half-Life games is a testament to that. And of course, Valve had embraced the mod community, so that's something that in this day and age of DRM and always online stuff and restricting what players can do with modding their own content, I think Half-Life and the openness of Half-Life, just like id Software's openness, releasing the source code, all that kind of stuff, that is something which is essential to the further, installing the next generation of games designers, not just players but designers, because a lot of people who design games started off playing them.
It is about trusting your community. I mean, and it's almost to a fault, but people have such good faith in Valve, and I think that could actually end up being a problem, especially with the Steam machine. Some people are wondering, like, what on earth is going on with this controller design of the Steam machine? Some people are thinking Valve might think that it's actually so good because of all the goodwill that they've done and all the support they've gotten that it might actually think it can't do a fault. And I'll give them the benefit and the doubt and think they're smarter than that and that they're really just trying.
Yeah, well, they
just to experiment.
Yeah, they haven't messed up yet, so we can take it on good faith.
They've always been the guys. Now, people should not try to think Valve is flawless. They're the closest company to being flawless because they don't do all that bullcrap other companies do for like DRM or season passes or online passes or things like that. They trust in their community. They're practical about their business. They even treat each other fairly. Like, they have a flat management system where there is no hierarchy, there are no bosses. Everyone works on the same level doing their different jobs. But
just one exception, though. I think it's Gabe that has a vision of that all the games won't be physically on the hard drive anymore. They will be streaming from the internet.
Well, they've already started doing something like that, but I'm sure they're smart enough to because they always listen to people, what they're saying. It's like, if people say, I want to have an actual copy of my game, I'm pretty sure they'll listen because, well, you know what they say, the customer is always right.
Right, wasn't it something from, of course, jumping to another place, Cinemassacre, Mike Matei, from his reviews. He says that he's been seeing some nice games on through Steam, and he's downloaded them, but he likes to have a hard copy of various games. So
I mean, that's another debate. That's like
something to have on your shelf to say, I own this game.
Yeah.
Digital data is kind of hard to debate ownership of. I mean, they give you offline mode, and that's the closest thing you'll have.
Well, that's Steam, yeah.
For example, I take my laptop to a party and there's no internet. I'd like to show a bit of stuff. If I ever get modding on the source, I'd like to show my creations without having to hook up.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it ease of portability, and gives more power to the users, to do with the data as they please. So, I mean, well, it's one of those things.
Until you hook up, then some kind of DRM will come out and say, "Uh-oh, here's been hacking. Let's resync this, shall we?"
Yeah.
Well, I mean, people have always been asking, and I'm surprised anyone even needed an answer. But like, why do PC games get away with DRM? It's like, because they use DRM obviously to prevent piracy, but they're not doing it in a way that breaks the game or restricts the player. They're doing it in a practical way where there's additional benefits to having to use it, like offline mode or community systems.
I think the problem with the DRM for games like Spore was it punished the legitimate players, but didn't evade piracy. I mean, Spore was pirated a couple of days before it came out even, or maybe after, sorry. But the problem with piracy is, and this is what Gabe Newell said, the problem with piracy is not purely technology. You're never going to, no matter how complicated you make a system to shut out piracy, there's always going to be people to circumvent it. That's the nature of technology. There's always a way around it. There will
always be people with the skill and moral bankruptcy that they'll always be able to get past your DRM. You can never get rid of them. Right. It's just like, and this is more of a political thing, but it's the same reason I have a beef with gun controls. The fact that making a law to ban guns isn't going to stop from the people who are breaking laws with them anyways.
No, and to kind of go to the gaming analogy, it's like, you know, okay, it doesn't stop piracy, but what it does do is it harms the people who legitimately buy the game by restricting their experience. You know.
Yeah,
so,
it's like the collateral damage thing. How there's that urban legend of cockroaches survive nuclear blasts. It's like you're trying to kill cockroaches with a nuke. They're going to survive, but everyone else is going to die.
Yeah, I guess. But yeah, it's these are all things in the future for Valve. Hopefully they'll do things right, and they will still remain really one of the best companies in gaming. You know, the best developers.
I trust them. They're always the ones to look out to their community, and they test everything rigorously before they release it into the wild. I mean, it's as Cave Johnson said, we're not releasing any of this stuff in the wild until it's good and damn ready.
Yeah, I think that's probably Valve's philosophy put in there. You know, so
nudge, nudge, wink.
Yeah, well, Valve always like to reference like their Portal's reference in Half-Life and vice versa. So maybe that's Gabe Newell himself being referenced. Maybe Gabe Newell is Cave Johnson.
Mind blown.
that's going to be the title of this podcast.
Gabe Newell, Cave Johnson.
Yeah.
You're not going to know the answer until the very end.
And we still don't know the answer, but we'll just say yes anyway. Okay, I think we've been talking for an hour now, so I think we covered a lot of stuff. So I think we'll wrap it up here. But yeah, it does, yeah. So yeah, anyone who's listening to this, go and play Half-Life again. Play the expansion packs and play Half-Life 2 and the episodes. I know it'll take a long time, but just sometime whenever you'll have a good experience.
You can pick it up on Steam, probably about $10, I think it is, and if you're lucky, you can get the full Valve pack, which is like all their Half-Life games for about $30, assuming you're catching it on a good Steam sale, which this is Steam, so most likely you will be.
Yeah, I think...
Just put it on the wish list and hope for the best.
Yeah.
I think wish lists have a little influence on rebates, or maybe personal rebates. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe so. If enough people wish for this game, then Valve will say, well, we can make a profit on this, but we'll do them a favour by making it, money off, that kind of a thing. That's being in touch with the community. So, yeah.
Well, why do you think so many people complain? Like, all my friends will complain the day after, like, summer or winter. My wallet's empty thanks to Steam.
Yeah.
People are buying games they usually don't even play afterwards just because of impulse purchases on sales.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sales on anything. I don't know why, but I seem to have an overabundance of meat hammers. Why did you buy them? They were on sale. I could save money. You could have saved a whole lot of money if you didn't buy it. 100% free.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Valve is singing, "We're in the money, come on, my honey."
And let's go and make Half-Life 3.
If nothing else, once they've bought these games, they've got some modding materials for, I don't know, Gary's Mod or something similar like that. Make a sketch out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay.
We got a lot of what it takes to get along.
There we go. Right. Well, I think this is the end of the podcast. Thanks for listening, everyone. It's goodbye from me, LizardGenes, and goodbye from these two.
See you later.
Goodbye from Edward.
All right. Bye-bye.